right, Sip&Talk fans, welcome back for another deep dive with yours truly, Joe. And you know what pairs perfectly with the deep dive? A good sip of something tasty.
Right.
You know, I'm rocking a classic iced tea today, extra lemon.
Oh.
Perfect for these thought-provoking conversations. Speaking of which,
Yeah.
let's bring in the expert who always gets those brain gears turning.
Uh-huh. It's funny.
Hey, everyone. Glad to be back. And
What?
I thought you were more of a coffee connoisseur.
Hey, gotta switch things up sometimes, keeps life spicy, just like the topic
Okay.
we're diving into today. You ready to tackle this one?
Always.
So
Especially if it involves geopolitics. Okay.
All right, so you know how I always end up in these YouTube rabbit holes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I stumbled across this video from Business Basics,
I see.
and it's got me side-eyeing my fortune cookie.
That doesn't sound good.
I know, right?
What's got you spooked?
The video's titled, Is China Really About to Invade Russia?
And it's racked up a whopping 2.4 million likes.
Wow.
Plus, Business Basics has over 1 million subscribers. Could they be onto something?
Yeah.
Are we about to witness World War III? The Manchurian Noodle incident.
Okay. Let's take a deep breath and unpack this.
Okay.
The video isn't completely off base. Remember Manchuria,
Yeah.
that region in Russia's Far East.
Yeah.
It used to be part of China way back in the Qing Dynasty.
Right, like old school
Right.
emperors and dragons kind of China.
Exactly.
Right.
But here's the thing. Russia took control of Manchuria in 1860. That's over 150 years ago. So while there's a historical connection, the current reality is that Manchuria is internationally recognized as Russian territory.
So like finding your great-grandpa's treasure map doesn't mean you actually own the buried loot?
Pretty much history is messy.
Yeah.
But legally speaking, Manchuria is Russia's.
Okay. All right, so no legal claim. But why all the buzz about Manchuria? What makes this region so special that it's got YouTube conspiracy theorists buzzing?
Manchuria is a hot commodity, my friend. Think prime real estate and geopolitics.
Okay.
First off, it's right next door to some major players. Japan,
Yeah.
Korean Peninsula. It's like being in the VIP section of Northeast Asia.
So whoever controls Manchuria gets to call the shots in the region.
Not exactly calling the shots,
Okay.
but it definitely gives them a strategic advantage. And it's not just about location. Manchuria is packed with resources, oil, gas, minerals, you name it, they've got it.
Now we're talking resources equal power, right? Especially for a country like China with its booming economy.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And don't forget the infrastructure. Manchuria has this amazing rail network that connects China, Russia, Japan, and Korea. It's like the Grand Central Station of Asia.
Wow.
A hub for trade and logistics.
Okay, so Manchuria, strategically located, resource-rich, and well-connected.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why people are getting their knickers in a twist. But wouldn't taking Manchuria mess up their whole best buds forever act with Russia?
That's where things get interesting. The China-Russia friendship is
Complicated.
complicated.
Like trying to assemble IKEA furniture
Yeah.
without the instructions?
Maybe even more complicated.
Oh, really?
They're united by a shared dislike of Western influence, but there's not a lot of trust there.
Right.
It's more like a strategic partnership. They cooperate when it benefits them both, but they're always looking out for number one.
So like that coworker who's super friendly to your face but totally steals your lunch from the fridge.
Exactly.
Right.
And the war in Ukraine has really strained their relationship. Russia is now more dependent on China economically, but China seems to be using that to their advantage.
Ooh, spill the tea, Sonny. What kind of advantage?
Well, there are reports of China undercutting Russian oil prices, creating payment problems for Russian businesses. And get this, there have even been incidents of Chinese hackers targeting Russian state agencies.
Wait, hold up, hackers. So China's playing nice in public while secretly trying to undermine Russia. That's shady.
It definitely raises questions about their true intentions. And that brings us to China's big project, the Belt and Road Initiative.
Right, the BRI, the one they're always bragging about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And guess what? Manchuria is a key piece of that puzzle.
Really?
The BRI is all about building infrastructure to connect Asia and Europe, roads, railways, ports, you name it.
Sounds ambitious, but what's the catch?
Well, while it's marketed as win-win cooperation, some see it as a way for China to gain global dominance and challenge U.S. influence.
So the BRI is like a giant friendly hug from China that also happens to squeeze everyone into submission.
That might be a bit of an oversimplification.
Hey, I'm trying to keep things relatable for our listeners.
Uh-huh.
But seriously, Is anyone buying into this whole BRI thing?
Some countries are definitely wary of China's ambitions. The U.S. is trying to counter the BRI with its own infrastructure initiatives, but they're struggling to keep up.
So it's a global infrastructure showdown, like a construction game, but with way higher stakes.
Yeah. You could say that, and countries like India and Japan are especially concerned. They're forming their own regional partnerships to try and balance the scales and keep China's influence in check.
Okay, so everyone's watching China like a hawk.
Right.
But back to the big question, is China actually plotting to snatch Manchuria?
Well, they've publicly denied any territorial ambitions there.
Okay.
But remember, actions speak louder than words, and all these economic maneuvers, the hacking incidents, the focus on Manchuria in the BRI,
right,
it definitely raises eyebrows.
Man, this is getting juicy. I'm suddenly feeling a lot less chill about my iced tea.
Yes.
Sunny, before we go any further, I think we need to take a deep dive into this whole Belt and Road initiative. What's the deal with this debt trap diplomacy? I keep hearing about, is it as sinister as it sounds? Stay tuned, Sip&Talkers, because we're just getting started.
Welcome back, Sip&Talkers. Let's untangle this whole debt trap diplomacy thing, shall we?
Yes, please, because right now it sounds like something out of a Bond movie.
Well, it's not quite as dramatic as that, but it is a serious concern. Essentially, China offers loans to developing countries for these massive infrastructure projects.
Right.
Roads, bridges, ports,
yeah,
the whole BRI shebang.
Sounds generous, right? Like China's playing Santa Claus with cash instead of toys?
Except these loans often come with high interest rates and strings attached if the country can't pay back the debt, which happens a lot, especially with these mega projects. China can swoop in and demand concessions.
Concessions like what, free dim sum for life?
Think more along the lines of control over strategic assets like ports or even political influence.
So they're basically using debt as leverage to get what they want.
That's the gist of it. A prime example is Sri Lanka. They borrowed heavily from China for a port project, couldn't keep up with the payments, and ended up leasing the port to a Chinese company for 99 years.
Yikes. That's a long time to be in debt to the Chinese takeout delivery guy, but okay. I get the BRI, I get the debt traps, but back to Manchuria, you're saying China could use this whole BRI thing to subtly take over Manchuria.
It's not about a blatant takeover, more like a slow and steady increase in influence. Imagine this. China pours money into Manchuria, building shiny new infrastructure, creating jobs. All of a sudden, the region becomes more economically dependent on China than Russia.
I see. So it's like they're slowly but surely weaving themselves into the fabric of the region, kind of like kudzu, but with less leafy foliage and more economic power.
That's a creative analogy, Joe, and it's not just about economics. Remember, the cultural connection we talked about. Right. China could use that to their advantage, promoting cultural exchanges, language programs.
So suddenly everyone's craving dumplings and practicing their Mandarin.
You're catching on. It's about creating this sense of shared identity, subtly shifting the cultural landscape in their favor.
Okay, this is getting a little creepy, but wouldn't Russia catch on to this? Wouldn't they push back?
They might, but remember, they're already in a vulnerable position.
Right.
The war in Ukraine has drained their resources, their economy is struggling, and their international standing is, let's just say, not great. They need China's support, which gives China even more leverage.
So it's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, or maybe between a bear and a panda.
Let's not mix our animal metaphors. Yeah. The point is, Russia might not have the will or the resources to effectively counter China's moves, especially if those moves are disguised as friendly cooperation.
Right. Like, we're just helping out our good pal Russia, wink, wink, but what about the rest of the world? Surely someone would step in and say, hey, China, back off.
Well, the international community is already pretty divided. You've got some countries firmly on Ukraine's side, others trying to stay neutral, and then you've got China playing this whole peacemaker role.
The peacemaker, huh? Okay. So they're offering to mediate while simultaneously cozying up to Russia and potentially plotting to, redecorate Manchuria.
It's a strategic balancing act. They're trying to avoid direct confrontation while also maximizing their own gains. And it makes it harder for other countries to take a united stance against them.
So it's like they're playing a game of geopolitical chess and everyone else is trying to figure out their next move.
Exactly. And that brings us to the question of timing. If China is biding their time, waiting for the right moment to assert more control over Manchuria, what could trigger them to make a move?
All right, Sunny, lay it on me. What are the red flags? What should we be watching for? All right, Sip and Talkers, we're back and ready to wrap up this wild ride through the world of geopolitics. Sunny, my brain is officially full, so let's get to the good stuff. What's being done about all this? Is anyone trying to stop China from potentially making a play for Manchuria?
Well, it's not like there's a giant Stop China button we can press, unfortunately. But the world isn't just sitting idly by. There's a lot of strategizing, maneuvering, and alliance building going on behind the scenes.
So it's like a global game of Risk, but with actual countries instead of little plastic armies?
Mm-hmm. Kind of. The U.S. is definitely taking this seriously. They see China as a major competitor, and they're trying to counter their influence in a few ways. Remember that infrastructure initiative we mentioned, the one that's supposed to be the U.S.'s answer to the Belt and Road.
Yeah, the one that's struggling to get off the ground.
That's the one. It's called the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, or PGII for short. The U.S. is trying to convince countries that their projects are a better deal, less risky, more transparent, no hidden strings attached.
So it's like they're offering a gourmet meal with no MSG, while China's serving up questionable takeout.
It's more nuanced than that, but you get the idea. The U.S. is also working on strengthening its military alliances in the region. Japan, South Korea, Australia, those are the big ones. They're conducting joint military exercises, sharing intelligence, and basically sending a message to China that they're not messing around.
So it's like forming a superhero team to keep the supervillain in check.
Something like that. And don't forget India. They're keeping a close eye on China's moves in the Indian Ocean. They're building up their own Navy-forming partnerships with countries like Japan and Australia, and basically making it clear that they're not going to let China push them around.
India's like that friend who always has your back no matter what. But what about Russia? Where do they stand in all this? Are they just going to let China waltz in and take Manchuria?
That's the million-dollar question. Russia is a tough spot. They need China's support, but they also don't want to be seen as China's puppet. They're walking a tightrope, trying to balance their own interests with their dependence on China.
So they're playing a dangerous game, like trying to juggle chainsaws while riding a unicycle on a tightrope.
Let's maybe tone down the imagery a bit, Joe, but yes, it's a precarious situation. Russia might try to downplay the issue, dismiss any concerns about China's intentions as Western propaganda, or if they feel threatened, they could lash out, escalating tensions and risking a conflict. It's hard to predict how they'll react.
Okay, so basically we're all just holding our breath and waiting to see what happens. That's not very reassuring, Sunny.
Well, uncertainty is kind of the name of the game in geopolitics, but here's the thing. The more we understand these complex dynamics, the better prepared we are to navigate them. It's about staying informed, being aware of the potential risks, and advocating for peaceful solutions.
So basically knowledge is power.
Exactly. And that's what Sip and Talk is all about. We're here to break down complex issues, spark conversations, and help you make sense of the world around you.
All right, Sip and Talkers, that's a wrap for today's deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground from Manchuria's history to the tangled web of China-Russia, relations to the potential for conflict, and the global efforts to maintain peace.
If you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, that's understandable. It's a lot to take in.
But remember, folks, this is just a starting point. We encourage you to do your own research, explore different perspectives, and form your own conclusions.
And don't forget to subscribe to Sip and Talk for more deep dives into the most fascinating and thought-provoking topics out there.
Until next time, this is Joe and Sunny signing off. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, keep sipping and talking.